As women, we can attest that being on your period is something we almost never look forward to. But 1 out of 7 to 10 women actually suffer in such a debilitating way every month, and sometimes even longer. And while medical research on this specific issue has been advancing, there is still so much to be discovered, shared, and especially so much awareness to be raised. Because when something does not seem quite normal and it is not discussed, how do you know if you're one of the women in this statistic suffering in silence because you don't know any different, or simply your case has still not been looked into deeply enough to get a diagnosis or a solution? I'm talking about endometriosis, a disease with symptoms which can be ravaging, as some women often have compared the severe cramping to contractions coming in waves or even labor pains. And what's more, endometriosis can cause further serious issues that go beyond pain and oftentimes take an emotional toll on the women who suffer it. I spoke with Daniela, a brave endo warrior who is committed to helping women learn more about this disease and how to get help. She shares her story with hope that every time another woman learns more about it, there will be one more that is saved from both its long and short-term effects. Acompáñenme a conocer la historia de Daniela y su lucha personal contra la endometriosis y aprender más de los síntomas como cólicos menstruales extremadamente severos y otros que posiblemente nunca pensaste podrían estar ligados con una enfermedad seria que afecta a 1 de cada 7 a 10 mujeres y cuyo diagnóstico a veces puede parecer casi imposible para las que lo padecen aún con todos los síntomas. Este episodio está grabado en inglés, pero te invito a verlo en plataformas de video donde puedes ver las traducciones. So I want to start by introducing you. Can you tell me your name and a little bit about your background and, anything you want to share about yourself for starters?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this important conversation with you. My name is Daniela Pardo. I'm a reporter here in Sacramento. I cover politics at the state level, and I've been a journalist for more than 10 years. And, as a journalist, you're used to or what you do for a living is you tell people stories, you share information to create awareness, to educate the community. And just last year, I found out that I had endometriosis, and this became something that I wanted to open up about and help spread information and share a little bit about my story, because when I got diagnosed, I didn't know anything about it. And it was a really lonely journey, and I want to use my story to make it a little bit less lonely for other people.
Definitely. I know it, and from what you've shared with me outside of this conversation, it has not been an easy road. So, thank you so much for making the time to join me today and for speaking about this really important topic that is kind of not. There's not so much awareness out there as I think there should be,
Yeah.
and I think I would, and I just want to be very transparent. And I would have never guessed that this is something you were experiencing or going through. And I think that's why it's so important to talk about it, because a lot of people that go through this, including myself, kind of suffer in silence. And it's not until you really open up that other people kind of, start opening up as well. And then it becomes less of a silent, I guess, illness, or just something that it's a burden that you don't have to carry on your own. So I want to start by kind of going through your life experience with this. So if you want to kind of tell me how your problem with endometriosis started and just how it progressed over the years.
Okay, sounds great. I'll start with what it is, because some people have heard about it, but it's not really clear what exactly endometriosis is. So it's an inflammatory chronic condition that affects 1 in 10 women. And I actually read recently that it's more like 1 in 7. That's a huge number. I mean, when you think about it, if you're in a room with 100 people, like 10% of the women there have it. And a lot of people don't know that they have it because, well, some women don't experience any symptoms, but some of the common symptoms for people that have endometriosis are heavy periods, painful periods, pain in your legs, infertility, ovarian cysts, pain during intercourse. I mean, painful bowel movements. It's the list of symptoms are pretty long. My symptoms were, so I'll backtrack a little bit. When I was younger, my periods weren't bad. As I progressed, or as I got older, maybe in my mid to late 20s, they started getting longer and then heavier and longer. And I was like, okay, like, a lot of people have long periods. And then I started getting more cramps. I didn't always have cramps as a teenager, but as I got older, I noticed that I was having more symptoms. And maybe in my late 20s, I noticed that things were different and things just didn't feel normal. And so I started with just my primary care doctor. I shared with her that I was worried with how heavy my periods were, and that that it was painful. And basically I was met with, oh, that's normal. Never, despite describing a lot of the symptoms of endometriosis and me not knowing that I had it, or what this even was, I didn't hear from that doctor that that could be a possibility. And so from that doctor, I went to go see an OBGYN. She did an ultrasound, and the ultrasound showed that I had some cysts, but she said that they were common, that, I could take birth control to help stop the bleeding or slow, can manage some of the symptoms. But when she mentioned birth control, I was already married, and my husband and I, we were kind of close to the point where we wanted to try to start to have kids. And I had never been on birth control before. So I just didn't really feel super comfortable starting birth control, because my idea of birth control was you take it to not get pregnant. I was pretty ignorant. I didn't know that people take birth control for other reasons, including to manage periods. And so I'm like, why would I take birth control when I want to get pregnant pretty soon? And that sounded, counterintuitive, or it just didn't sound like, it didn't make a lot of sense. And she never really explained to me, like, this is why. And so I was like, no, I don't really want to take birth control. But my ultrasounds show that things were fine, things were normal. She said I didn't really have to worry about the cyst. So then I kind of just took her at her word for it and went on with life. And just, I knew from those visits that, like, there was something going on, but I went to these experts and they told me that things were fine, not a word of endometriosis. Time went on, and I did another ultrasound because things started getting worse. My periods were lasting now weeks, and they were so heavy. I mean, I'm talking about bleeding through my clothes. I know, like, TMI, but we're women and we have to be real with, and raw, right, with what these symptoms are. And it was just one of those things where I was like, I don't know, maybe if we do an ultrasound, something will come up. Nothing, just birth control, birth control. And so I just kind of let it be. Time went on, and um, fast forward to last year, when my husband and I were now more serious about wanting to start trying to have a kid. I said, I don't know, I don't want to start trying because something just feels off, and I'm so scared to, like, have a possible miscarriage because something just doesn't feel right inside. And so I happened to be in Colombia, where my grandma lives, and I went to go see a doctor there. And the doctor there told me, she did some ultrasounds, and she said, you have endometriosis and you also have a fibroid. I can talk more about the fibroid later.
Wow.
She's like, you need to have that removed. Like, the cyst that you have in your ovary is causing major issues. Like, it's affecting your egg count, it's affecting the quality of your eggs. And this is the first time I had really heard about endometriosis. And I'll pause there,
That
but
gave me
I had to
chills.
basically go to a doctor, or
Yeah.
saw a doctor in a different country, that doctor that was really well versed on it, and was just like, this is what you have to do when you go back to the US and you go and talk to your doctors. And she was like, you have to become kind of an expert in this. You have to, like, know the symptoms, know what this is, and say, this is what I have, and try to get a diagnosis. Because on average, it could take 7 to 10 years for someone to get a diagnosis, which is crazy.
It's so crazy. And I'm just, just listening to you, that gave me chills. It took going to a visit. in a to a doctor in a different country for that to be diagnosed. So I was curious, when you mentioned that, how did you feel after you had already done your due diligence, gone, to a couple of doctors, I think you mentioned, or several doctors here in the US, and all, the resolution they had for you, or the way to resolve this was kind of a band-aid, on to be on birth control. And then, I guess, how did you feel during those times when that's the solution they gave you, and then after you visited this doctor in Colombia where they actually diagnosed you so quickly?
Thank you for asking that because I felt so stressed. There in the last 2 years when my symptoms started getting really out of control, and I had really no quality of life because the pain from my periods became so bad that I was calling out of work many for up to 3 days in a row, and I felt really stressed. I wasn't able to sleep at night because I didn't know what was wrong. I was like, how is it possible to bleed this much, to be in so much pain, and to have a doctor tell me that's normal? And so I started really worrying about what this meant for my fertility down the road, and it was really scary. I didn't want to. My husband and I got married 4 years ago, and we wanted to enjoy our first few years of marriage. And I was never really in a rush to have kids. I wanted to have kids in my mid 30s after we'd been married for a while. And so now I felt like, oh my God, did I make a mistake? Like waiting because I feel like things are just so bad inside. And so when the doctor in Colombia told me that I had endometriosis and that about half of the women, 30 to 50% of the women that have endometriosis struggle with infertility, I was terrified. It's like I had heard, like, you're going to struggle with having kids, you're not going to be able to. And that's not the case. Many women with endometriosis are able to become pregnant. And I didn't have any hope at that point. I just went into kind of panic mode. And this was like a day after my 33rd birthday where I had this appointment, and I was like, oh, new year. And I was so excited. And, it's always, there's something about a birthday that just comes with so much joy and a fresh start. And then, I mean, I'm glad that it happened when it did, because for once I was not in the dark. I finally got some answers and clarity about what was going on. But it was hard. And the more I read about it and the more I saw, I went on TikTok, I went on Instagram, and I started looking up pages and just more about it. I also went to like official sites like the endofound.org and other official organizations. But as you know, social media has become a place where many people open up about their stories with fertility, with diseases like endometriosis. So I found a lot of answers there. And actually, the first person and the only person that I follow who I had ever seen post something about endometriosis was Olivia Culpo, who's a former Miss Universe. She's a supermodel, actress, married to an NFL player, and she's very open about her journey. And I remember seeing it a while ago and just being like, oh, wow, like, I wonder if I have that. But then I just dismissed it. And so when I found out I had it, I went to her page, and on her Instagram, she had a highlight on endometriosis and had links and had tagged a lot of good pages to follow. And that's kind of how I started being more aware and learning more about it through social media. Actually, a lot of people have taken the time to create pages to educate women and to be there for others that are going through this.
Yeah, and it can be something, and from based on what you've shared, super isolating, once you realize that, this is not normal, and not all women go through this pain and this difficulty. So how did it feel once you realized that you had a serious condition that needed to be treated, after all those years and all those, those struggles trying to get a diagnosis and get some help?
That's a great question. Well, knowledge is power. So once I knew what it was, I mean, I read so much about what it was. What can you do to cure it? There's no cure, but there's way to manage your symptoms. And so because endometriosis is an inflammatory disease, I immediately changed my diet and just started eating more anti-inflammatory foods. I cut out alcohol and coffee for a while because it's inflammatory. I kind of went on a strict diet for like 3 months and just was and I this is just what I did. I don't think people need to go, cold turkey and just eliminate everything. But I really did just started paying more attention to my body and what felt good and what, caused flare-ups. And so I mainly now try to do a whole foods diet, really prioritizing fruits, veggies, protein. I don't really do processed foods. I'm someone that loves in and out, would have in and out like probably like, I don't know, like 3 4 times a month. And that's, the healthier fast food. But I just was, and I'll still have it every now and then, but like I just try to avoid like fried stuff, processed foods, sugar, things that just don't go well with inflammation. Those things cause inflammation. So I kind of started there. And then I also started, because the doctor told me that I need to have surgery to have my endometriosis cyst removed. I started looking up doctors that could do that surgery and what that would look like. And then remember, I live in Sacramento, not in Colombia, so I had to find a doctor here to help me to treat me. And that was such a challenge. It was so hard to find an endometriosis specialist that would be able to do the surgery. And thankfully I have had surgery, but through the specialist, the doctor that was going to do it here in Sacramento, I was going to have to wait like 5 months to do the surgery. And I kept Googling, I kept looking. I found a doctor in LA. Her name's Dr. Thais Aliabadi, who is one of the top specialists in endometriosis. So I went down there and had my surgery a little over 2 months ago. But the waiting game from the moment I was diagnosed with endometriosis to getting the surgery was so hard because I felt like the more time that went on, the worse that things got. And just navigating the healthcare system was really stressful, just really hard to get someone to listen to you, to believe you that the symptoms that you're describing are not normal. I think people may be confused normal with common. Like this is a common disease because it affects 1 in 7, 1 in 10 women, but it's not normal to have so much pain during your period to the point where you can't get out of bed, you have to cancel plans, it consumes you, it like eats you up. And I definitely reached that point last year, and I sort of lost myself. I told the doctor that did my surgery, I'm so glad that I found you because I felt like I was just going crazy. I felt like the more time that went on, the less I liked myself. I hated who I was becoming because I was just so stressed and anxious. And I thought it was me, like, I don't know. And she was like, no, the pain that you're going through will do that to anybody. So it was amazing to finally find a doctor that was like, it's not in your head. Like, I can't believe you went through this, and I'm gonna help you. And it's been amazing now being on the other side of it, having had my surgery. I ended up having several endometriosis cysts removed. And when she did the surgery, she found that my ovaries were twisted and stuck to my pelvic wall, which makes sense why I was having so much pain when my ovaries were
Yeah.
like this. And she removed, I actually have this little thing that shows this is a uterus. And this is what like endometriosis can look like. It just shows up in places where it's not supposed to. Endometriosis is when the lining that's inside the uterus appears in other places. So I had mine throughout my uterus, as many people do. And so when things that aren't supposed to be there are there, you're gonna feel pain. But no one had ever explained that to me. So just fast forward to today, doing so much better, but it was such a journey to get here, and it shouldn't be this way.
Oh yes, and I totally believe it and understand, how did it feel emotionally once you did find this relief, this help, and this doctor in Los Angeles that was able to do your surgery? Is there a feeling afterward of like some sort of um mourning for the time that you spent in so much pain, and how is that process emotionally?
I mean, I cried just when I got a consultation. I was in tears. I just like couldn't believe it that I was so close to getting to where I wanted to be. I felt like it was an answered prayer. Basically, I had prayed for this. I'm a person of faith and had prayed for so long for God to guide me to the right doctor, to the right care, to whatever I needed to feel better, to get my life back. So when this happened, I felt like I could finally breathe again, because I felt just so hopeless, so stuck. And I, even being a person of faith and believing that things weren't going to be that way forever, I got to a point where I was like, God, like, I need your help so bad, please. Like, I was getting really, or I was upset because I felt like I was doing all the right things and I just couldn't find the right person to take care of me. So I felt like there was finally a light at the end of the tunnel when I got to that point. And for so long being in the dark, I just got used to being in the dark, that when I was able to find that doctor and get my surgery, I was like, ah, okay, okay, it's going to get better.
That's amazing. And it's so it gives so much hope to hear. And I'm hoping that this reaches the women that need it the most.
Yeah.
Because it is a tough road. It's hard to learn to advocate for yourself when you don't even know what's going on and
That's
what's
so
happening.
true.
So, and you're right, just being offered the same, I guess, solution over and over again until you finally find like a real reason why and are able to get treatment. It's just such a
Mhm.
long journey, and like you said, it takes years. So fortunately, you're on the other side of the tunnel. So can you tell me about, what it's been like, what the process was like, for recovering from your surgery, or I guess, how is that entire process like? And now that you have been healing and recovering, how have things improved?
Thank you so much for asking that. Things have improved immensely. I actually didn't expect to feel this good this fast, because even though I'm an optimistic person, endometriosis changed me. Like, I became such a sad person that I had kind of lost my hope, and I became very, very weary and very like, I don't know. I got used to being in that state. So now that I'm on this side, I would say physically it's been great. Mentally, I'm still struggling with that. I'm still kind of like recovering from all that stress and anxiety that this disease caused me. And it's hard for me to believe, like, yes, I am better. And the thing is that many people have to have multiple surgeries to remove the endometriosis, because it's something that can come back. But that's why it's crucial to find the right specialist who is able to remove all of it. And so I now feel hopeful again that the way that it works with surgery, for my husband and I, just to try to have kids, we have to wait several months for my uterus to heal. I'm now about 7 weeks post recovery. So I went back to work after 3 weeks. I'm able to work out again. I just have to modify the workouts. I used to do very like high intensity um workouts that I can't do that anymore. I need to do more low impact, kind of listen to my body. It's gone through a lot.
Yeah.
But the surgery was the name of the surgery was a laparoscopy, which they cut like 3 incisions on my sides, and then they also did one like in my belly. And then I also, on top of the endometriosis surgery, I also had a surgery for fibroid removal. And fibroid are these non-cancerous growth, these non-cancerous tumors that also affect a lot of women. And the fibroid that I had was in the same location where or an embryo grows, which is why the doctor told me, you have endometriosis and you have fibroids. You need to get this removed, because there's no way you'll be able to get pregnant with that in the way, because it's what in the place where the baby would grow. And so for that, the fibroid surgery, I had an incision that's like in the same place of where a C-section is going to be. I was told that I'm going to have a C-section when that time comes for me because of the type of surgery I had. It would just be too risky to do it the other way. But I'm just so grateful to just have all this information and just
Yeah.
mentally prepare for what's to come, because before I just had no idea if this was even a possibility for me. But the doctor told me your uterus is clean, you're good, like have faith, you're going to be able to become a mom. And we don't know if if it's going to happen right away, if it's going to take us months or years, but I'm so hopeful and have so much faith that now that all the disease was removed, we'll be able to get there, to become parents. But it's such an emotional journey. I mean, not every married or not or woman wants to have kids, but a lot of women do. It's a big thing that we look forward to, becoming moms, and endometriosis can change that for a lot of people. And in some cases, when you live with the disease for so long and not know it, you get to a point where sometimes in the worst case scenario, the disease has spread so much. So I'm super thankful that I had the surgery when I did. But again, as women, we know our bodies, we know ourselves. So even if you get told by the doctor, painful periods are normal, this is normal, when you know something just doesn't feel right, go to another doctor until you find someone that helps you and wants to get to the root issue of your symptoms. And so I look back and at those doctor's appointments, and I was like, wow, I always knew something was off. I always knew something just didn't feel right. We're busy with work and with life. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever, like I'll deal with it later. And I wish I hadn't waited so long. But everything happens for a reason, right? And
Yeah.
I hope that others, those that may listen to this and have, these really painful, hard periods, this pain, and they're thinking, I wonder if I have that. I hope that they start reading more about it and learn to become your own and best advocate.
Definitely. And it's so amazing to hear that, now you know exactly how to take care of your body. Now that you've had this surgery and are healing, and you know how to like really prepare your body for, getting pregnant when the time comes. So that's really amazing. So it's like a whole 360 that, you did just from the moment you learned about your diagnosis. I wanted you to share a little more with women who are listening to this about, your advice when looking for a doctor. I think I'm really curious to know as well, what are the things, the specifics that you look for when you want to find a doctor that really gets invested in your case and finds the root, and actually may provide that referral or that help for you to get to a specialist that can do a surgery like this?
Yes. So I would start with, on Facebook, there's a group called Nancy's Nook. And Nancy is a woman that has dedicated her entire life to being an endometriosis advocate. This woman, I believe she lives in Oregon, and I hope I'm not getting this wrong. I think she's a former nurse, but basically, she's created a list of resources, a list of doctors in every state that are specialists, and more specifically, doctors that can do the surgery. And if you go to Nancy's Nook, you I think you just have to request to be in the group, and she's broken it down by like what it is, what you can do, and kind of how to live with it. But that list of doctors has been really helpful for a lot of people, because where do you go when endometriosis isn't really talked about enough? A lot of OBGYNs, sure, they know about it, but they're not specialists. So that's a good place to start, just because there are people in every state that are on that list.
That's really great. Thank you for sharing that information. We have a few minutes left, so I wanted to offer that time for you to share any other, advice or information you want. I guess if you wanted to kind of, I know you touched on the symptoms, but what are some other things that you've learned along the way that can help someone that may not even know they're going through it?
That's a good question. Yeah, I would say that Endometriosis, for a while, I feel like I did let it define me. It became all that I was because I thought I was going to have to live this way forever. But the more I read about it, the more I educated myself on the diagnosis, I found that you are able to live a better life if you find the right treatment, you find the right care, and that can look like birth control, surgery, the proper nutrition. But I think when you first find out that you have it, you immediately go into a dark hole. And I think it's so important to let the people in your life around you be there for you, whether that's your spouse or your family. And of course, it's such a personal thing to share. It's not like something super fun to talk about, right? But the more we talk about it, the less taboo it becomes, and the more normal this conversation is in our circles. Because what I found is that when I opened up about it, I got so many messages, including you, Magali,
Yeah.
who were like, I think I have this. And we went back and forth, and I was like, oh my God, we need to continue having these conversations, because a post like that could help, even if it's just one person. It's so worth it, because one of the great things about our generation is that we are a little bit more open with things like this, and I'm grateful for that. We overshare, right? But
Yeah.
if it hadn't been for these women that have posted their journeys on social media, I probably wouldn't be here, because I still wouldn't really know what this is and how to deal with it. So if you're comfortable with it, open up to people in your circle, because when I started talking about it, even before I made the post, just with people at church or friends, they were like, "Oh, my mom has that, or I had that, and I had to do this." And I was like, "Okay, wow, this is super common. Why have I
Yeah.
never ever heard it before?"
Yeah.
And so that's something that when I was like kind of not so afraid of putting it out there and saying like, hey, I've been a little bit distant, I've been a little bit different because I'm dealing with this, people were like, oh my God, wow, same here. And it's just crazy, because it's people that I'm really close to or know well, and would have never ever known. So let's
Exactly.
continue to have these conversations, and I'm so glad that you are doing this, Magali, and that you reached out. You're amazing, and I hope that your journey is a positive one, and that you are able to find all the answers and right care for yourself.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate your time and you doing this. It's definitely helpful. It gives hope. When you're right, when I saw your post, I was like, oh my God, like I would have never, like I said, I would have never guessed. But also, look, she found a solution. And I'm still on the journey trying to, fighting for a diagnosis and finding the right, doctors and getting everything in line. I'm just really grateful. And I think that it's so amazing that women like you are willing to share and be transparent about it. And for women that, even from other generations or that came before us that have had this issue, like the one you mentioned, Nancy, from that group.
Mhm.
Like if it wasn't for this, for women advocating for themselves, I don't know, where we'd be, and if we'd even get this help, or if there would be specialists out there focusing on this now and really listening to their patients. So I think it's incredibly important. So thank you so much again for joining me and for wanting to have this conversation and raise awareness, because it definitely is important. Like I shared with you, I never realized that not, having excruciatingly painful cramps
Mhm.
was not normal until after I turned
Oh,
30. Yeah.
yes,
And I,
here.
and
That's when
I,
it really got bad.
yeah, and my symptoms and everything has especially gotten bad, and it's such a coincidence, and I mean it makes so much sense when you were
Mhm.
sharing more about your story. I realized that if I had maybe learned more about this when I was growing up, it wouldn't have gotten to this point, because just like you, I've also had surgery to remove a huge cyst that was
Okay.
right next to my right ovary. And it's just so, I guess it's so common, but we don't realize it because there's not a lot of information out there, and we're not taught these things from a young age. And so, I just appreciate it so much. And I hope that it reaches the right women that need to hear about this, not only women, but their partners, their brothers, their fathers,
Yes.
everybody that, is there for them and that needs to be aware of this as well so that they can get the right help and support that they need.
Amen. Well said, Magali. I appreciate you so much. Thank you. You're amazing for doing this.
Thank you, you as well. Thank you for taking the time, Daniela. And I'm really, really glad you're doing better. And I really hope that God, really allows everything that, you're yearning for to happen and to come to fruition. And I know, this has been a long and painful road, but, there's light at the end of the tunnel and you're really helping us see that. And thanks for your testimony.
Amen, sister.